The X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Rob McConnell's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the X-Zone Radio Show or endorsed in any manner by Rob McConnell, rel-mar McConnell Media Company, the X-Zone Broadcast Network, its affiliated networks, stations, employees, or advertisers.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Good evening, one and all. This is the X-Zone. I am Rob McConnell, and we're coming to you from our broadcast center and studios in beautiful Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. If you'd like to send me an email, it's xzone at xzoneradiotv.com on all social media sites, X-Zone Radio TV. And if you'd like to find out all about the great programming we have available for you on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit www.xzbn.net. And for all the programming that's available on Simul TV, that's where you can watch the X-Zone the X-Zone TV channel and the X-Zone Radio TV show. Just go to www.simultv.com. My first guest tonight, X-Zone Nation, is Lewis Proud. He is a writer and a researcher specializing in anomalous phenomenon. His articles have appeared in New Dawn, Paranormal, Fate, and Nexus magazines, and he's been interviewed on such programs as VERITAS Radio, Paranormal Realms, and Whitley Strieber's Dreamland. The author of Dark Intrusions in 2009, The Secret Influence of the Moon in 2013, and Strange Electromagnetic Dimensions in 2014. He currently resides in Burnie, Tasmania, Australia. Joining us now is our guest this hour, Lewis Proud. And Lewis, welcome to the X-Zone.
Oh, thanks for having me on.
How did you become interested in the paranormal, Lewis?
Yeah, well, I think it's something that goes back to my childhood. Mm-hmm. So I've been interested in this stuff from an early age. I've read a lot of books or started reading books on unexplained phenomena. Fairly sort of ridiculous books on the Loch Ness monster and that kind of thing. Right. So I always had an interest in those sorts of topics. And also my father too was, there were a few sort of paranormal stories in the family, an alleged poltergeist incident, for example, that my father experienced in his childhood. Mm-hmm. So he had some interesting stories to tell, and also I think it relates to the fact that I grew up in Tasmania in the forest there, so I've always had that sort of connection to nature, and I think that's and that's sort of how I approach these sorts of topics. I mean, I don't believe in the supernatural. I believe in unknown aspects of nature. So that's sort of how I approach these sorts of topics. I think that we're looking at things that only appear supernatural simply because we don't fully understand them yet.
Lewis, in 2009, your book Dark Intrusions was published and released. Tell us about that book.
Yeah, right. Well, Dark Intrusions the topic is about sleep paralysis. Mm-hmm. And it started when I was in my early teens and late teens, early 20s. I started having quite frequent sleep paralysis episodes. And that's basically where you find yourself in a sort of twilight state of consciousness,
right.
Half awake, half asleep.
Isn't that what they call the hypnagogic realm, or the old hag syndrome?
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Right.
So the hypnagogic realm, that's correct. So it's a very mysterious state of consciousness, mm-hmm. And all sorts of strange things can happen when you're in that state. So, of course, these experiences are, of course, interpreted as, hallucinations.
Yes.
So there can be sensations of touch and also voices, and also people can see, they might see something in the room, for example. So it's all very mysterious, but and my approach is that I believe that some of these experiences are genuine paranormal experiences. I don't think they're necessarily only hallucinations. Obviously, there is that aspect to it, but certainly that's another thing that also started me on this path of writing and researching about these sorts of topics.
Isn't there an association with those who have or claim to have had alien abduction experiences, that they find themselves waking up into the they call it the what do they call it? Into the sleep paralysis, where the ETs are there, they can't move, and the next thing you know, they're being transported to an above craft.
Yeah, that's very true. Certainly, I mean that's one explanation for alien abduction experiences. I think it's important to realize too that hypnagogic state is a doorway to out of body experiences as well. There's also that out of body aspect to alien abduction episodes. The whole idea of being floated into a spacecraft and that sort of thing. So I kind of explore all this stuff in my book, Dark Intrusions. I think there's certainly some similarities between, the sort of traditional sleep paralysis experiences of a presence in the room, a sense presence, being touched or hearing a voice, and these alien abduction experiences. I mean, it's almost as though, I think partly it depends on how you interpret these things.
When you have had these sleep paralysis episodes, what have you encountered? What have you experienced?
All sorts of things. My sleep paralysis episodes were very auditory. I did hear a lot of very strange voices, very terrifying, actually. There was one period there where I was having very, very intense, frequent sleep paralysis episodes, and there seemed to be this entity that was visiting me, night after night, saying things in my ear, and it was absolutely terrifying. I mean, and at the time I kind of thought, well, there seems to be it's like it was a demon or something like that. It was absolutely terrifying. Thankfully that doesn't happen anymore.
How did it stop, or what did you do in order to get the sleep paralysis to finally stop so that you could get a restful night and, a basic back to normal life, so to speak?
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, I think it partly was just the fact that the experiences are quite common, in your late teens, early 20s. I think as I got older, it just
grew out of it.
Yeah, that's part of it. I think too. I tried all sorts of things. I think just sort of getting my, obviously your mental and physical health also has an impact on these things. I was sort of not at a happy place in my life at that stage, and also I started doing a lot of meditation, and all sorts of things like that as well, just to sort of get a bit more balanced in life. And I think too that the fact that I think that also helped. Sort of channeled, some of that energy into sort of trying to understand it, and also try and take sort of a logical, rational approach to it as well. I mean, I still do believe that there is a paranormal element to these experiences, but I feel too that you've got to, it is also partly a matter of interpretation, and you don't want to get sucked into it too much, and go down the rabbit hole too far. I suppose you've got to try and remain grounded when these sorts of paranormal experiences happen, because you can really, it can be a dangerous thing.
I would imagine so. We've got about a minute before I have to take my first break. Lewis, what is your advice to listeners who may be experiencing this sleep paralysis today, and they're frightened and they don't know what to do? What is your advice to them?
I think it's important to read up on the topic. Certainly, do your research on it. I think it is a good idea too, also to perhaps, get some advice from a psychologist or someone like that as well. You might be having these experiences because you're, suffering from depression or something like that. And antidepressants too apparently can be quite helpful in, preventing these things from happening too. I think it's good to seek professional help first. Before maybe turning to the more spiritual, esoteric explanations.
All right, Lewis, stand by, my friend. Once again, thank you so much for joining us. Lewis is joining us from Burnie in Tasmania. It is it's tomorrow in Australia, so if, I wish that our Australian friends were able to give me the winning lottery numbers for tonight, but unfortunately that doesn't work. We've tried that before. So Lewis Proud is my special guest, and his website is www.lewisproud.net. He's a writer, researcher specializing in anomalous phenomena. This is the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell, and Lewis and I return on the other side of this break as we continue from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away. Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X Zone radio show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X Zone broadcast network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember, 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
You have heard of the X Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV. Plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X Zone, sci-fi, and horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
We live in rapidly shifting times of extreme volatility and uncertainty. Such profound change brings a unique opportunity for the evolution of consciousness. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, host of Mission Evolution Radio Show, a program that explores the latest scientific developments and deepening spiritual truths supporting human evolution. Join me on XZBN.net, where I interview leading experts in science, physics, medicine, spirituality, and more. By applying divergent viewpoints to leading-edge topics, we uncover expansive and evolutionary truth to assist you on your path to enlightenment. More information and past episodes are available at missionevolution.org.
Welcome back, everyone. If you'd like to watch the X Zone Radio TV show, there's only one place, and that's on the X Zone TV channel, and it's part of Simul TV. To find out more about Simul TV and how you can get yourself one of their top set boxes, that includes 500 games, videos on demand, programming on demand, and 80 specialty channels, including the X Zone TV channel. Visit www.simultv.com. Louis Proud is my special guest this hour, www.louisproud.net. Your second book that was released and published in 2013 is very interesting. It's entitled The Secret Influence of the Moon. Tell us about that.
Right. Okay. The Secret Influence of the Moon. Yep. Well, gosh, I basically just at that stage in my life, I was reading a lot of interesting articles about the moon, interesting books such as Who Built the Moon, for example. And I just thought it would be interesting to bring all these ideas and this research together and, explore such things as the origin of the moon, for example, which is, of course, still a mystery. That was just really my attempt to address some of those mysteries. And in that book, I take the approach that the moon may in fact be a partly artificial object. It may have undergone some form of engineering early in its history. And I'm just fascinated.
It truly is a fascinating object. When you were doing the research for your book, Louis, was there any moment that you just had to say to yourself, wow, you've got to be kidding? Right.
Well, I was, I guess so. I mean, I guess the biggest thing is that the theory that the moon was created as a result of a giant whack, or it was a Mars-sized body that collided with Earth, and that created all this debris, if you will, that then coalesced to form the moon. That theory, the big whack theory, or giant whack theory, that argues, of course, that the moon formed, at a very high temperature.
Right.
And it's the orthodox, it's the standard accepted theory, the theory that's accepted by most scientists, of course. And I started to look into this, and I did in fact send emails out to scientists and so on, geologists, etc., who studied these things in detail. And a lot of them did confess to me that there are some big holes in the giant whack theory. So I was quite surprised. I mean, they were sort of quite reluctant to say this publicly, but they did tell me that. For example, the fact that there are volatiles in the moon, volatile elements, a lot of moisture, for example, that contradicts the giant whack theory, the idea that it formed at a very high temperature. So really, science simply can't explain the origin of the moon. I mean, I think that's incredible.
What is your hypothesis, your personal belief on why NASA has not gone back to the moon after all these years?
Right. Well, certainly, I suppose part of it is the fact that NASA has, Mars is more of an interest now, of course. I mean, there's talk of having manned missions to Mars, for example.
Right.
Possibly, I think they certainly did discover a lot during those Apollo missions, of course. And maybe not all of those findings were, revealed to the public. I am open to the idea, too, that there might have been some kind of intelligence that they encountered on the moon. That is a possibility. There are rumors that that's what happened, that some of the astronauts did encounter some kind of intelligence there, and they were more or less told, not to go back, to stay away from the moon,
right,
if you like. I mean, there's all sorts of theories and ideas. It's who knows what the truth is, but I don't know. And also, some of the astronauts, when they were there, they just said that, the presence of the moon, they were just sort of overwhelmed by, I suppose, I don't know, they felt very uncomfortable being there in a lot of cases. It's possible, too, that I think that, the whole idea of like a secret space program as well, I mean, that might have been happening as well, that we don't know about it. So, that kind of thing. There might have been other missions to the moon that we don't know about. I'd say that certainly scientists are still very interested in the moon. But yeah, the focus really seems to be on Mars these days.
It certainly does, especially after finding that molecule last week. It certainly has everybody keyed up again about let's get to Mars and find out what is really out there. A quick question before we start talking about strange electromagnetic dimensions. Are there a lot of UFO reports or a lot of UFO sightings in Australia?
Well, I'm not really I haven't really been following it, to be honest.
But I mean, just listening to the media, do you hear a lot of these reports?
Not really.
No.
It seems to be pretty quiet these days, I'd say, or really globally.
Yes, that's right.
I'd say there probably doesn't seem to be a lot of UFO activity. All that activity has more or less sort of quietened down. It's a little bit hard for me to maybe comment on UFO activity in Australia, though.
I was just wondering, listening to the radio, watching the news, if there had been any recent activity. So thank you very much for that. Let's talk about Strange Electronic Dimensions, your book, released in 2014. Tell us about that book.
Yep. So Strange Electromagnetic Dimensions is, of course, my third book. Mm-hmm. And the reason I wrote that book was because I wanted to look into such things as high voltage syndrome, which is another name for people who affect electrical devices in a strange way.
Right.
And also poltergeistry. It also overlaps with poltergeistry as well. And also street lamp interference as well, which is where people affect street lamps in odd ways. I know. Walk under the street lamp, for example, will blink out, they'll walk away, it will blink back on again, and that sort of thing. So that book was really an attempt to, to delve into some of those sorts of topics, and also, the idea that also wanted to explore the idea that artificial electromagnetic fields are having a negative impact on our health and well-being as well. So, and the thing is, there's an electromagnetic dimension or aspect to a lot of paranormal phenomena.
Yeah, so, I was going to ask you about that, because we humans have our own electromagnetic field. The heart sends out electrical pulses. We have iron in us, which is magnetic. And and it's interesting to finally find people like yourself who are looking at this aspect and making the correlation with the paranormal. Very interesting. Do you believe that there's good evidence for a magnetic sixth sense in humans?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is called magnetoception, and it's the ability to detect a magnetic field in order to perceive your direction, altitude, or location. So it's an ability that's found throughout the animal kingdom. I mean, obviously most famously in homing pigeons, for example. Yeah. So a lot of animals have this ability to be able to navigate using the Earth's magnetic field. It's even found in bacteria. And there has been some research done on this topic in regards to human beings. There was an interesting set of experiments that were done in the 1970s by a British biologist named Robin Baker. And what he did was he put these school children on buses, basically, blindfolded them and took them on these long, winding journeys, throughout the countryside. And then he'd tell them to get off the bus And then while they were still blindfolded, he'd get them to point in the direction of home. And in a lot of cases, they were able to do this. There was a very strong statistical effect. But when they took the blindfolds off, they became completely disoriented. And his idea is that that they had been using this magnetic sixth sense, but on a sort of subconscious level. And he believed that this effect was quite weak. And he hypothesized that our hunter-gatherer ancestors had this ability, but it's not so strong in modern humans because we don't need it as much. We have GPS and those sorts of things.
It seems that we are born with our own internal GPS based on the electromagnetic fields.
That's it. Yep. And you've got to realize too that that's how we evolved. I mean, we are synchronized in an electromagnetic way to the Earth. I mean, the Earth's magnetic field, for example.
Listen, you and I hate to do this to you, but we're going to have a little bit of a cliffhanger here. I've got to take my news break at the bottom of the hour. Lewis, please stand by. Lewis Proud is my special guest, Exo Nation in Burnie, Tasmania. His website is www.lewisproud.net, and he is a writer, researcher, and he specializes in anomalous phenomenon. This is the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell, and you're listening to us around the world on the X Zone Broadcast Network, Talkstar Radio Network, Mutual Broadcast Network, Simul Radio TV, and iHeartRadio. We'll be back. Don't go away.
From our broadcast studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, to the world and beyond, you're watching the X Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net.
AVS Media Demo.
You have heard of the X Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X-Zone, Sci-Fi, and Horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world, interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
Rob McConnell here, presenting an overview for Nicholas Paul Jennings, author of a fascinating book, Amen. It presents facts revealed by Egyptologists, facts that enable us to understand why Amen is the beginning of creation of God. It provides recommendations for religious leaders of the major religions to unify their beliefs and teach the Word of God. Love one another. Amen informs people how mankind conceived God. It was the Egyptians that developed the concepts of a soul, a hereafter, and Son of God. And finally, after the worship of many gods, they conceived the belief in one universal God, the maker of all there is. For more information, visit www.futureofgodamen.com. That's www.futureofgodamen.com.
Welcome back, everyone. Lewis Proud is my special guest tonight here in the X Zone. His website is lewisproud.net, and he is a writer and researcher specializing in anomalous phenomena. He has written 3 books to date. The first book, going back to 2009, is Dark Intrusions. In 2013, The Secret Influence of the Moon. And in 2014, The Strange Electromagnetic Dimensions. Lewis, what evidence is there that artificial electromagnetic fields, such as those emanated by power lines, are actually having a negative impact on our health and well-being?
Right, yep. So this is another topic that I explore in quite some detail in my book, Strange Electromagnetic Dimensions. So I think there is quite strong evidence for this. So first of all, we need to realize that the use of electricity on a large scale is a fairly recent development in human history.
Right.
So, for the most part, we haven't been immersed or surrounded by these artificial electromagnetic fields. Mm-hmm. So, when we're synchronized biologically, as I mentioned before, to the Earth's magnetic field, so these natural sources of electromagnetic energy. So it's such a recent phenomenon, and we don't really quite know what the long-term impact of that is, that type of exposure. And so I've looked into this. The World Health Organization will tell you that, and this is a quote here, to date there's no evidence to conclude that exposure to low-level electromagnetic fields is harmful to human health. And most of the studies that you'll find mentioned in the media and so on all sort of more or less indicate that. But the thing is, the studies that contradict that show that there is a harmful effect, they don't obviously get as much attention. And I've looked into this, and there's a couple of ways that artificial electromagnetic fields seem to have a negative impact on our health. And one is that some studies have indicated that they suppress the production of the hormone melatonin.
Right, that affects your sleep,
in the pineal gland, and that disrupts the sleep-wake cycle.
Right.
And in turn, people are more susceptible to developing cancers and that sort of thing. So you'll find this in, for example, shift workers. There's a higher incidence of cancer in those people as a result of that disruption to the sleep-wake cycle.
My goodness.
And the other thing too is that exposure to EM fields, in some cases, some studies have shown that it results in a state of chronic stress in the body. And then that in turn, of course, impacts the efficiency of the immune system, and that obviously makes us more susceptible to illness. But basically, these effects have been known for a long time, for decades. It's really dates back to World War II, was the widespread use of the development of radar technology, and that uses, of course, like pulsed microwave energy to detect distant objects. And it was noticed very early on that these radar operators were experiencing effects, such as leukemia, headaches, brain tumors, etc. And these effects, of course, are independent of the normal heating effects that would occur. So obviously there's going to be heating effects associated with radar, but these effects are independent of that. So it was noticed very early on that there were issues there, that people were developing these health problems. And of course in the 1970s, in Eastern Europe, they did a lot of research into this. And they came up with the term radio wave sickness.
Right.
And that relates to exposure to mainly radio frequency fields. And so they found that people who are exposed to that sort of energy quite frequently develop such things as headaches and increased irritability, loss of appetite, sleepiness, memory problems, depression, etc., etc. And I think there's good evidence that for example, the mental health issues. There's a lot of mental health issues these days.
Big time.
People suffering from anxiety, depression, etc., etc.
Stress.
And stress, exactly. Yeah. And more the planet is becoming electrified.
Let me ask you this. The amount of cell towers, the amount of Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, this must be having a negative effect on people.
Yeah, I definitely. And we're really sort of the guinea pigs, so to speak, because it is such a recent phenomenon.
Right.
So it is. It's very, very disturbing. And in fact, I had some problems back in 2012. There was a device installed in the house called a smart meter.
Oh yes, we have them here in Canada as well.
Yeah, and of course, the whole idea is that you don't need someone to come to the house to read the meter.
Right.
The device actually transmits that information via like brief, sharp pulses of radio frequency radiation. And there's at that time when this device was installed, and I didn't see the connection at first, but I soon discovered that connection. I was having incredible difficulties concentrating, and I just felt like I couldn't sit still for like 5 minutes,
right.
Which was very problematic at the time because I was actually working on my second book at that stage. And then I, of course, did the research and so on, and it turns out that in Melbourne, where I was living at the time, there were quite a few cases of this, of smart meters being installed in people's homes, and family members, people having to actually leave the house because they were just having these problems, particularly, as I said, in this case, sort of headaches and concentration and memory issues and those sorts of things. And they just felt, as I did, incredibly irritated. And I did actually end up leaving that house, and, immediately I felt a lot better. I mean, people will argue that, okay, it was a psychosomatic thing, et cetera, et cetera. I was under stress at the time and, et cetera, et cetera. But I think the evidence that, particularly smart meters, I think they're, particularly harmful. And it's got to do with those very short, those brief, powerful pulses of radio frequency radiation.
Well, you've got to wonder about all this modern technology, because at gas stations it says while you're filling up your car, shut your cell phone off because of the microwave. Don't put it to your head. Don't do this. Don't do that.
Yeah.
And yet more and more people are bringing that technology into their lives. Why doesn't somebody just say, stop, look what it's doing to you, for God's sake?
Yeah. Well, I guess it really all comes down to money, doesn't it?
It sure does.
And there's just so much money to be made, by the telecommunications industry, etc. And it's already just got to the point where it's just such a big part of our lives. I mean, we'd be sort of lost without these devices now.
But what will happen if one day there's a solar flare and the power grid goes down, or there's a shift in the magnetic fields? What are people going to do?
Yeah, well, that's it. I mean, we don't really know what's going to happen. I mean, certainly, if the the power grid was knocked out, I'd say there would be just total chaos, and we'd be sort of kind of like barbarians again. We'd be tototally lost. I'd say that it'd just be chaos and confusion.
About 7 years, we've been here. About 12 years ago, there was a solar flare that knocked out the power grid that affected most of Ontario and the northern United States. And, people were lost. Those who we're so dependent on technology. But my wife and I, we've kind of been around the bend a few times. So, you adapt. You just adapt. And yet our kids and our grandchildren who are so dependent on technology, they were stressing out.
Yeah.
It's calm down. Well, the phone doesn't work. Well, that's why we've always told our children to make sure they have a copper attached old phone. The one that's not dependent on a Bluetooth or one that's not dependent on the internet. The old-fashioned, true to anything going wrong telephone. And there are so many things that people should do, and yet emergency organizations are not teaching this to the people who are so dependent on modern-day technology.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's it. I mean, the younger generation in particular, I'd say they'd be especially affected by this because, a lot of them didn't even grow up with necessarily like a landline telephone, for example. That just they some of them aren't even aware that that's how it was back then.
That's right. The old saying was, you're born with a silver spoon in your mouth. Today it's you're born with an iPhone in your mouth. Stand by, Lewis. You and I have to take our final break. Thanks so much for joining us and sharing this information. Exo Nation, Lewis Proud is our special guest. He is in Burnie, Tasmania, all the way across tomorrow. See? This show reaches from today to tomorrow. Lewis and I will return on the other side, and if you'd like to find out more about Lewis, visit his website, lewisproud.net, and he is a writer researching, specializing in anomalous phenomena. Still to come this hour, we're going to be talking to Lewis about his latest project entitled Natural Wonders. This is the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell. We're coming to you live and around the world from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away.
You have heard of the X Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X Zone, sci-fi, and horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
The new nonfiction book, Razor of Madness, is similar to cult movies like Clockwork Orange, Dragon's Tattoo, or The Other Side of Hell. Wayne Morin Jr. and Thomas Lee Howe will expose widespread and systematic deficiencies in this thought-provoking tell-all novel. Mind control rages among scholars in law schools. Human rights are ignored while thought reform and mental manipulation are accepted practices used as behavior modification. Dr. Louis Jolyon West comes to mind. Media and public scrutiny shows that United States mental hospitals are in fact destructive murder industries. Razor of Madness expose novel details this epidemic through an in-depth professional and personal investigation. For decades, there has been a revolving door policy that still releases killers and pedophiles back into society. The maestro of mind control continues to haunt America to this very day. Razor of Madness is available in paperback or as a downloadable ebook at Amazon.com.
The concept of a new age has been around since the late 19th century, yet much of its original meaning has been lost. What exactly is the new age? Is it a religion, a collection of obscure esoteric practices, a series of doomsday predictions, or an astrological event? The New Age Chronicles is a unique, complementary publication bringing reason and grounded information to separate fact from fiction. chock full of valuable information to support you as we make the monumental shift into the new era. You won't want to miss a single innovative issue. The New Age Chronicles newspaper is coming soon to www.newagechronicles.com.
Welcome back. Lewis Proud is our special guest, www.lewisproud.net. First of all, Lewis, thanks very much for joining us tonight. Great pleasure having you on the show, and I wish you continued success. Before we get talking about your new project called Natural Wonders, parapsychologists have tried to explain psychokinesis and other psychic abilities in terms of electromagnetism. Have they been successful?
Yeah. No, not really. I mean, this is something that started, back in the early days of parapsychological research. So both by, Western and Soviet parapsychologists, of course, in the Soviet Union, of course, they referred to it as psychotronics. That was the term that they used. Yeah. And you're familiar, of course, with the whole, sort of psi war, as they call it, that was happening between the Soviet and Western scientists and so on. So there was this whole idea that psi, as it's called, blanket term for, psychic abilities and so on, could be used to gather intelligence and could basically be, an asset in warfare and so on.
Sure, and remote viewing is an example of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. So there was a lot of research done into this, a lot of experiments. But basically, there was one idea that it was thought for a long time that extremely low frequency waves might have something to do with psi, just on account of the fact that these waves can travel right around the Earth,
right,
with little loss of energy, and they can also penetrate the Earth and the ocean, etc. So they did a lot of experiments, particularly in telepathy, where you'd have like a traditional experiment, of course, you'd have like a sender and a target, or sender and receiver. And so they did experiments where they'd place one of those people, let's say the receiver, inside an enclosure that blocked out all forms of electromagnetic energy, including, extremely low frequency waves. And they discovered that there was still an effect taking place. So they did a lot of experiments like that. And so the very fact that, that receiver or sender or receiver can be in an enclosure that blocks out all electromagnetic energy, indicates, and psi can still take place. It certainly indicates that, magnetism is not what mediates, these abilities. So it's not as though we're sending out electromagnetic waves that the other person is receiving, for example. So they've done a lot of research into this. And of course, parapsychologists these days, they're sort of more looking into things like, quantum mechanics and that sort of thing to try and account for these abilities. In my book, Strange Electromagnetic Dimensions, I had a look at this from the perspective of, some of these sort of subtle energies, such as chi, orgone, etc. Yeah. And because as we know, I mean, it's that's another theory that maybe some of these energies are involved, and although I wasn't able to necessarily answer that question, whether or not these energies are behind, these abilities, I think it's a very promising line of inquiry. So, there's this idea, it's a universal idea, in this sort of life force energy, if you like. And I found too that in a lot of a lot of cases of not just electric people and also poltergeist agents as well. And as I said, the two phenomena overlap in the sense that people who, a lot of poltergeist agents seem to have a strange influence on electrical devices, and their bodies seem to become very highly charged with static electricity as well. So I think when you look into electrostatics, I think there's possibly the energy that's used. I think it's probably very similar to static electricity, but it's not the same as static electricity. So I think that's what parapsychologists should be focusing on, and that's what I tried to do in the book. I wanted to go back to all those old cases of, for example, there was a famous case back in the 1920s in a prison in Danmora, New York, probably not the correct pronunciation there, where these the prisoners they developed botulism poisoning, and they developed what was described as peculiar static electric powers, whereby objects were becoming, they were attracting objects, and their abilities were still present even when they were like immersed in water, for example, which would you'd think would sort of dissipate that static electricity. And so I think that's something certainly worth looking into. And, the very fact, too, that a lot of famous psychics suffered from a young age, like either struck by lightning, although that's quite rare, or they suffered an electric shock, for example. So that in fact happened to Uri Geller.
Yes.
When he was about 5 years old. He was electrocuted, or not electrocuted, but suffered an electric shock from his mother's sewing machine. There was a little hole in it, and there was a bright blue spark, and he stuck his finger in there, and he was thrown backwards. And he said that his abilities developed soon after that.
Yes, we've had the pleasure of having Yuri on the show a number of times,
right.
He's relayed that story, and he says, and he believes that it was this shock that kind of kick-started his psychic abilities.
Yep, exactly, yep. So once again, though, there's an electromagnetic dimension to these things, and yet the evidence indicates that electromagnetic energy is not what's allowing these abilities to occur. So perhaps some of these things are some kind of side effect, I suppose, of electromagnetic processes within the body or within the environment. As I said, it's such a complex area, and so multifaceted. So I certainly don't have the answers to these questions, but electromagnetics is certainly a very promising line of inquiry.
Now, we've got about 3 minutes before we have to say so long for today. First of all, again, I want to thank you for coming on the show. We'll have to have you back on because there's still so many questions I wanted to ask you. But for tonight, tell us about your latest project called Natural Wonders.
Right, okay, yep. So I'm working on a book at the moment called Natural Wonders. It's basically it's going to be a 3-book project. I'm just working on the first book at the moment. And at the moment, in this first book, I'm mainly focusing on spontaneous human combustion, and also sort of tying that into, some of my previous research in, electromagnetics, etc.
Yeah.
So the main focus is spontaneous human combustion. I'm also looking at poltergeist disturbances and that sort of thing. So, and I became interested in spontaneous human combustion, partly because it's just one of those classic 14 mysteries. It doesn't sort of get a lot of attention these days. And it ties into so many other mysteries as well, including, ball lightning and, as I mentioned, poltergeistry. There is this idea that perhaps the same mechanism is involved in spontaneous human combustion as poltergeistry. And there's a theory that SHC is a sort of an internalized form of poltergeistry in the sense that the energy is used basically by the victim to more or less commit suicide on a sort of subconscious level.
Wow.
So I think that's a very interesting idea. And then in the case of poltergeistry, that energy is projected outwards into the environment. So I wanted to explore that. And as I said, so it's going to be 3 books. It's probably going to take a while to complete the project. But yeah, just working on the first book at the moment, and hopefully that will be out sort of towards the end of the year.
Fascinating.
Maybe around November or so.
Well, we'll have to have you back on before then, because I still want to talk to you more about this. I wanted to talk to you about the possible connection between ball lightning, earth lights, and the UFO mystery. So we'll save that for another time. But for now, let our listeners know where they can get copies of your books.
Right. Okay. So all of my books are available on Amazon, and Barnes and Noble, and also you can visit my website as well, louisproud.net, and there are of course links to where you can purchase my books, etc.
Excellent.
I've also got interviews posted on. I do like a video blog too, which I post on YouTube, for example. But yeah, I'd probably just suggest visiting my website.
Louis, I want to thank you so much for joining us. Great talking to you. I wish you'd continued success, and I look forward to the next time you and I meet back here in the X Zone. So until then, take care of yourself, my friend.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, my great pleasure. X Zone Nation, our guest this hour has been Louis Proud, and once again, his website is www.louisproud.net. He is a writer and researcher specializing in anomalous phenomenon. I'll be back on the other side of this commercial break with the news at 6.5 minutes past the top of the hour as we continue here in the X Zone with yours truly, Rob McConnell. Don't go away.
Modern Esoteric, Beyond Our Senses by Brad Olson, consummates the lifeology story about where humanity originates. It is the lost continents, the primitive wisdom, the mythos of creation, and the rethinking of ancient history as we are taught in academia. There is much more to the story than what we have been told. As this is the first book in the Esoteric series, Modern Esoteric starts at the beginning of time and accelerates up to this modern age. Future Esoteric is book 2 in the series and takes a forward-looking position ahead of today with an open and honest examination of the ET issue and various unexplained phenomena. To discover the writings of author Brad Olson, visit www.bradolson.com. That's www.bradolson.com. Are you or is someone you know struggling with addictions, depression, anxiety, relationships, low self-esteem, lack of confidence, grief, success, and prosperity? Do you know that your subconscious belief plays a big role in the outcome of your hard work? We can help you permanently change the beliefs that may be the reason for your struggles and failures. We care about getting you the return on your investment and the results you are looking for. We can help you be free of the limitations of your past and in realizing your highest potential. We work with people by phone and Skype. For more information, visit us at www.ritasoman.com. That's www.ritasoman.com. Do you think you have energy problems in your home? Do you feel better when you're away than when you're home? Joey Korn is a global leader in the world of dowsing who specializes in personal energy clearing and space clearing. He can help you create an ideal energy environment in your home no matter where you live in the world. Learn about his remote spiritual house cleaning services and much more at www.dowsers.com. You can get Joey's book, Dowsing, A Path to Enlightenment, as well as other dowsing books and tools, Kabbalah books, and Walter Russell books. Joey's work is really amazing. Go to dowsers.com right now. That's DOWSERS.com or call 1-877-DOWSING. That's 1-877-369-7464.